I'm recording.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes, it does.
Excuse me, my crayon is a monkey. I find this conversation
taking some interest in learning a bit more about technology, philosophy, and I like to.
I'm an educator.
Absolutely. We're going to stay anonymous.
That's a cop out.
The binary's gone. I thought jingle was like Dutch for cheers.
Welcome to Beyond Binary Thinking, because the world is often filled with far too many rich and nuanced perspectives to always pick a side.
We're doing a deep dive on various religions, and today is definitely one of the more maligned and politically active religions I've been interested in a while. So,
Chalice and Kim, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. Let's use this conversation as an opportunity to understand more about the Satanic Temple and yourselves as individuals. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
So my name is Chalice Blythe. I'm one of the senior members of the Satanic Temple's International Council.
And I'm Kim LaRoux, and same, part of the International Council. We're international now, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, actually have been since the beginning, which is a misnomer. Anyway.
I was going to say you're the super senior.
So before we get too much into work, tell us something about yourselves personally as individuals. What's something you'd love to do but don't have enough time for?
Netflix and chill. literally anything but work and school and TST. Like literally, if I could do literally anything else, that would be fantastic.
Amen to that.
I think my problem is I do everything I want, which means I don't get everything done. I just do too many things. But I try to do everything I want to do.
I'm the same as you, Kim. I'm always starting projects and struggling to finish them. Yeah.
I mean, you got drawing things, you got drums, you got everything.
All the toys.
Jack of many trades, yeah.
So moving on then to the TST. So what's something that most people don't know about the Satanic Temple?
That we're an actual religious organization and activists second.
Very, very true. I would agree with that one. And a lot of people have their base assumptions about Satanism, and that we worship the devil and eat babies, and we only eat babies on Thursday nights. So.
Yeah.
Only on Thursdays.
Only on Thursday at dusk.
Only at dusk. That's very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to a friend about you guys, and his feedback was that you would be disappointingly boring. He said you guys were far too vegan to drink blood, and you're more likely to be Dungeons and Dragons LARPing virgins than be sacrificing virgins.
Well, let's see. Maybe partially true, but we can get into it a bit.
I was gonna say there's some half truth to that, but we will let you guys determine which part's true and which part's not.
I'm sorry, guys, but if you're going to go international, you have to understand this is how British people show love and respect. Just a bit of right off the back.
We ain't afraid of you.
Some of the criticism reminds me of what I've heard about Extinction Rebellion, where either they're morbid and they're scary and they're a death cult, or they're just like silly and attention seeking, and that's what people said about Extinction Rebellion, and I feel it's similar to you guys. Like, you can't really win. There's not really much point listening to the critics, right?
Well, I mean, I think to keep ourselves out of the echo chamber and not be too silly, I mean, listening to the critics can be, but there's this difference between just the professional critics and then the constructive criticism. So it's really hard when you're dealing with a religion that has been completely misunderstood since its inception, and also because we are a different iteration. We are kind of an evolved practice of Satanism that others haven't seen before, especially with like the Church of Satan. It's very difficult to keep those that just want to keep their ideas of who we are, because it any new information or listening to our side of things kind of threatens their preconceptions of what it is, and it's especially what's really ingrained in society, and depending on their upbringing, it could be a slap in the face of their more religious leanings as well. So it's if it's a constructive criticism, or if it's a conversation about who we are, and being able to understand that we don't all have to agree, but at least understanding that we are the experts on who we are and who we are not. And I think that's the biggest thing that drives me crazy, is that people assume they're the experts on things that they don't practice and they don't identify as. So
yeah, it's particularly frustrating when somebody comes at you with a question you've been asked probably 1,000 times, or a statement that's been made about you 1,000 times. It's been cleared up. You have a fact page, we have websites, we have interviews, we have, how much source material is out there that tells them that they're just blatantly wrong, but they're going to ignore that, or not even bother to read it and make their preconceptions and just try to hit us with that. And after you've dealt with it, I say, like I said, around 1,000 times, and probably literally around 1,000 times or more, you don't discount that, but you recognize that type of input as, sort of useless.
Fair enough.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, go for it, man.
I was just going to say, before we get too deep into it, I was probably one of those people who had preconceptions about a week ago. I just assumed that, there's probably not different versions of Satanism, and you're the guys who just go around and do what they want, right? And then Chris pointed me to that documentary, Hail Satan, which explains a bit more about your organization and what you do and your stance and everything. So could you explain from the very beginning, and just clear up a few misconceptions for some of our listeners who might not have heard about you, or might
for
have
the
these kind of
1,001st
radical
time.
for the 1,001st time. Could you give us like a super brief summary of your organization and where you're coming from and what you're aiming for, kind of thing?
You go ahead, Kim.
Okay. I really think that it's important to point out that we are religion first. We are an actual official religion recognized by the United States government. How often do you hear about a new religion coming along? Really, this is a milestone. And so that's an important thing. And I love it when people say things like, well, you're not a real religion. It's like, you should really do your homework on that one, because you are provably wrong. You can make this argument, and you will, and you do, and these people do this kind of thing,
right?
Right. Yeah, it took a while. Yeah, it's not something you can just do. You can become a religious organization in 10 minutes online. That is a organization that supports a religion. To actually become a religion is incredibly difficult, and there's a lot of requirements, and they're very specific. So that argument that we're not a religion just goes out the window immediately to anybody who has a brain.
Do you guys get to avoid tax now?
Well, we can, but here's the thing. That's never been our goal.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's a nice
What a lot of people don't realize is we made a statement a long time ago about churches and how they, inappropriately use their abilities and things. We've had the ability as a religious organization prior to being a religion to be tax exempt. And we've never, please give us the ability to bring in a ton of money so we can actually do a lot more of what we're trying to do. None of us are getting rich off this. We're all volunteers. It is one of those things where if people want to talk to us about misappropriating money, I will laugh in their face and invite them to come over and see what this is like. We're trying to do the most good we can with very, very, very little resources. And we're doing a lot of good. And it feels good to do these things. And that's why we do it.
Yeah, and one of the things that gets brought up a lot, especially with this, getting recognized by the federal government, is we had previously stood on the fact that we don't need that validation from the government to be a religion. We know who we are, we know our history, we know our community, and we stand just on those principles alone to be a legitimate religion, whether or not we get recognized by the IRS or not. But part of the reason we took this step was because we see a lot of encroaching theocracy within the United States, and they're getting into our laws, they're getting into our Supreme Court, they're getting into our lawmakers. There's a big thing called Project Blitz, which is specifically the purpose to affirm that we are a Christian nation, which it absolutely is not. So it came down to the fact that we wanted to be on an even playing field. Because if we're going to stand up for ourselves as a religious minority, then we have to have some kind of, essentially legal protections for that, especially since we do have current lawsuits. One of the very first things we have to answer the question of is, well, how are you religious organizations? So now that we do have that recognition, that question gets thrown right out of the window, and now they have to really answer the questions of, you know, what is the justification for the reason that we are taking whatever legal steps we are doing. So it benefits us in more ways and has less to do with paying taxes and has more to do with this is our way of basically taking out the opposition's justifications for telling us to go fuck ourselves constantly. So
yeah, that became very, very important, because I think at the beginning it wasn't anticipated that a major legal defense against us wouldn't be that we weren't real. I'm trying to think if I made too many double negatives there.
Yeah, you've lost me there.
But a lot of the arguments is that we're not, a lot of the legal arguments
I'm
against us is
confused
that
now.
we're
Are
not
you real? Is this conversation
we
happening?
are real, yes.
Okay.
And and then whenever we have the ability to actually be official and things like that, those legal defenses fall apart, and they are trying to be used against us even currently. So I mean,
Constantly.
it really is an essential thing that we needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How much of a difference has it made now that you have that?
Not a lot. I mean, it's really, we're doing the same exact things we were doing before. Same operation. Everything is almost exactly the same.
Yep, just another damn Tuesday.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's the stress of being a political activist, right? The journey's never complete. Right? There's always the next thing. There's always the next challenge.
Yeah, trying to work forward on a lot of initiatives, especially when you're trying to essentially sort of fight for the underdog, make the world a little bit of a better place, make people treat each other a little bit better, recognize that we are individuals and that, we all are different, but we should be included, let's not see our differences and things like that. That battle will never end, so it is a job where there's a goal and you're never going to reach it, but by trying to reach it, you're going to help. So.
And I don't think the political conservative Christian right is going to stop fighting you guys either anytime soon.
And as Chalice mentioned, there is Project Blitz. It's 2,000 U.S. state senators. They have all gotten together and they have plans. There's a playbook. You can Google it. You can Google Project Blitz right now and find that handbook. It's a PDF document. Download it. It is a playbook on how to drive Christian theocracy into the U.S. legal system. They are trying to do that actively.
And I was reading the concept of, is it the 7 mountains? It's part of the same thing. So it's not just about politics and legal, but they want to be in like entertainment and media and family and every aspect of like life in America. They want to not even like have more power, like completely dominate the conversation.
Yep.
Yes.
Good luck with that.
It's scary. It's insidious is what it is. It's insidious.
Yeah.
It is, you are going to believe what I think you should believe. And the scary argument behind that is the justification is well, I'm going to make sure you go to heaven. I'm doing this for your own good. So
I know Kim was raised as a Southern Christian fundamentalist. Is that true? Like for both of you, have a religious background?
My parents were Christian. They were more Baptist and then more Methodist. So I wouldn't call them fundamentalists. I would say my mom was probably a little bit more to that lean. Now, a lot of my family can be like one step above snake handling, backwoods, Christians and everything, which, it can get a little scary.
I think Methodist means something very different in America than it does in England, where in England, it's just like the most tame, boring form of
it's pretty tame. I mean, you can drink, all that good stuff and everything. Baptists, they're, you cannot drink, that kind of stuff. So it gets a little bit more strict on the Baptists, and then you get into the scarier Protestant stuff.
But Chalice, were you raised a Christian, or is that not the case?
Yeah, I would say that I was raised a very generic New Testament Christian, and my family is still very much leaning that way, but we very sporadically ever went to church. But I like to say that religiously I grew up Christian, but culturally I was raised Mormon. Because I did a lot of, I grew up
You're in Utah, right?
Utah.
No.
I grew up in Utah, and part of the things that people don't understand about that very specific state is that even if you are not, a self-identified Mormon, you can't escape the culture. You cannot escape their laws, especially since, that it's its own little theocracy in of itself. And so, I was without really consenting to being under Mormon culture. I certainly got my taste of it, and it, very repressed throughout my years. So yeah, it's.
So I've had a really a strange interaction with the Mormonism faith, because my friends work for a Mormon software startup, and apparently this is quite a big thing. Not only do they microfinance each other, but also because they all have to go on mission and like do the stand in the street and proselytize, right? They actually get quite good at sales, so they end up being really good salespeople, really hard work ethic. Right.
That's pretty great.
And they have a booming tech economy right now in Utah, right? It's really interesting.
They do, yeah.
I imagine the people I've met with passports, who've traveled, who've worked internationally, and with non-Mormons are probably different to a lot of the people you interact with.
Well, there's this very common saying in Utah. There's Mormons, and then there's Utah Mormons. So we experience a lot where Mormonism is still very much a weird minority religion in and of itself. I mean, they do have a lot of outreach, and then they do try to convert as many people as possible, but they're still fairly much the minority, especially anyone who's of the Christian ilk. So you have a culture of Mormonism where if it's anywhere but Utah, people live in these various communities. They come, and they're not confronted, but they're dealing with a lot of different other cultures in different places, and they tend to just kind of like do their own thing, and they respect people's differences, and they don't bother anybody who isn't them. Utah, it's very different because it is the promised land. It is the home of
home turf,
it's home turf. So yeah, the Utah Mormons are very different than others, but I think as far as being somebody who's a very vocal and public Satanist, I don't think I've ever been treated more kindly and with more respect than by Mormons. And that's not saying a lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, they pray for you, and they'll probably talk shit about you behind your back, but to your face, they I think there's an understanding there of we thanks for making us look less weird. Probably an appreciation there.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
it sounds like you guys must have interesting conversations at Christmas around the dinner table then with your families.
Oh yeah. Well, I have a family member who is he's a preacher. And he and I had a lot of philosophical discussions over the break when I went back home for the holidays. But it was very constructive and really great. And I think at one point he was telling me, we're not too much, we're not all that, different, because he wanted to understand what it was, and it's interesting to see different people's perspective. And he's one of those hippie ministers, but.
Sure. So I've been impressed by how well read many of the Satanists I've been in touch with are. And I was wondering, have you guys reread the Bible since becoming Satanists?
I've done a lot of things with the Bible. Reading it, probably not so much, but I've done a lot of other things with it.
Okay. I often say I wish Christians knew the Bible as well as Satanists and atheists. Mm-hmm. Because they usually don't. And we as in what we do, we have people challenge us a lot and things, and it's good to know your stuff. And it is interesting what the misconceptions people have. And my issue with a lot of things today is that the Christian right especially has become the new canon is now Fox News, it seems. They've given away all their values to follow politics and follow that kind of thing, and to try to preserve their beliefs, and they'll vote for anybody that that gives them any support for their beliefs. And I think they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, is the old saying in that one.
I can't imagine a group more likely to nail the second coming of Christ to a cross than the current Republican right.
Exactly.
All of the Christian values they claim to have. You're like, okay, so should we help the poor? Are we going to help the needy? Are we going to turn the other cheek? Are we going to not judge people? Not cast the first stone, right? Like, no, none of that.
Yeah, let's all be kind to each other. And by the way, you have no rights because you're not like me, right? And that's it's ridiculous. Yeah, and like I said, Fox News has become the new Bible.
Bizarre, right? And it blew me away. I did a master's dissertation on religion. It's the psychology of religion. And I managed to piss everyone off because I was writing about the evolutionary benefit of being religious. sort of like as a group adaptation. So I managed to piss off the religious people and the atheists at the same time, which was great fun.
Well done.
And I was talking to all these religious people. I had to get them to do my study, right? So I had to go to all these different groups and make friends with them and get introduced as, oh, this is Chris the atheist. He wants to study us. Yeah, hi guys, how's it going? And I was chatting with them and I was amazed how little of the Bible they'd actually read. Like, I was like, oh, isn't it interesting about this? You know, like there's this logical fallacy here and that doesn't make any sense. And they're like, oh, no, I really hadn't read it. It was like, you believe this is the literal key to the door to either heaven or hell, and you haven't made time to read the book?
Yeah, it's a perfect work, right? Yeah, well, then why are there two creation stories in the first and second chapters of Genesis? Completely separate, by the way.
It gets confusing.
There's always an explanation, though.
It's almost as if lots of different people wrote it, and then, you know, it got translated a bunch of times and then corrupted by the Roman Empire for its own political purposes.
Yeah, and then assembled by committee. And
a lot of stuff left
that's
out.
a bit far-fetched. Come on.
Oh, yeah, that never happened.
Conspiracy theory, yeah, sure.
I think you guys have been reading too much Dan Brown.
Oh, please don't. That's very insulting to us. It's one of those things like, is he British? I don't know. Yeah, people are like, oh, you're interested in religion. Have you read Dan Brown? And I'm like, oh. So the other thing I've been really impressed with is the tenants. And again, I'm sure you've gone over them like 5,000 times. So I'll just put a link below in the show notes for everyone to read. But I really liked Tenant 5. That says we should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit our beliefs. And I think there's a humility there, right? But there's also an awareness of how primed people are, this instinct to believe in things.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things we always like to do is we talk about, you know, evolving our worldview and never have anything set in stone, because, you know, anybody who's even worked in like the science field knows that, you know, our understanding of the world is very, it evolves, and it is subject to revision. And, you know, I feel like we, you know, the reason why that tenet is so important is that, you know, a lot of the times we see these other religions, like, you know, we take the Church of Satan, for example, very much a product of its time, based off of what, you know, we understood about the world back in the 1960s and what was considered to be satanic in the 1960s. But, you know, as we grow, as we evolve, as we understand our world better, as we, you know, whether that's scientific discovery or as our cultures evolve, we should evolve with it and not have everything set in stone. And that's a lot of the problem we see with other religions, is that they're basing their ideals and they're basing a lot of how they view the world based off of people that, you know, wrote these things that didn't understand the world at all, or, you know, couldn't conceive of anything different because they didn't have the technology or the ability to understand certain things. So, you know, as we are evolving creatures, we should also, you know, be open to the fact that sometimes, you know, what something that we understand to be true can change, and we should be okay with that change and to go forward accepting that and moving forward, because that only benefits us as individuals, but also as a society as a whole. So, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, for an example, I mean, being gay used to be considered a mental illness. It was the DSM, and now it's been removed because we understand these things a lot better now. So from a scientific perspective, where we know that you know, hurricanes aren't caused by gay marriage. I mean, you know,
the absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence, right? That hasn't been proven yet.
Yeah, the God gap. The God gap is always a horrible thing, because, you know, it's like I'll go back to my crazy religious family, you know, sitting there at Thanksgiving one year, and there's a knock on the outside of the house. Look, boom, and I'm like, was a bird or something? And my uncle goes, you know what that was, right? I'm like, no, like a bird or maybe a bat, because it's nighttime. He's like, demons. Immediately, that's where his brain goes. And he was serious, you know. So, I mean, we're talking about, you want something to be a certain way. And so any evidence or any hinting at what could be evidence will take you there. And that's the not critical thinking. That's a path you should not be going down. Skepticism is not a bad word. Skepticism is just questioning. You know, you're just not going to accept things at face value until you qualify it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. I think quickly,
Oh, yeah.
if you're going to tether yourself to science, then it makes sense to be flexible, because obviously scientific theories are always updating based on the new evidence. So yeah, I love the humility and the decision not to etch things in stone. It's quite pragmatic. But I find what's interesting, to be fair to, and you did say the majority of the religious, I think that's a fair analysis. But for example, like, you know, certain Jesuit priests or Hebrew scholars, there are certain religious traditions where they do debate things and they do adjust and they have arguments. I mean, you know, let's be honest, like the Catholic Church is pretty slow to change, you know, like they're in about 50 years, they'll realize that maybe it's okay for Africans to use condoms. What I say is that there are some sects within these religions where people do question, adjust, and debate. But unfortunately, what often happens, and this is the study I did, where, you know, people who are very, very religious and very, very irreligious or areligious, whatever, are the most moral. And the problem is the people in the middle who are like, go to church occasionally, know enough to be dangerous and think they're better than everyone. The arrogance that goes with that. And obviously that's the majority of people, the main part of the bell curve.
And they're the ones that are in our government and write our laws.
And it's, whenever you're talking about different types of people who are religious, we're not against Christians at all. You know, I have a friend who's a Catholic priest. You know, I mean, I've known some Jesuit priests and things, and they were very intelligent, very, very nice people, and very smart. And they had their beliefs, and they were also able to study other areas of the world. And that, you know, was one of their things to do. And very, very fascinating and interesting people. It is I think I've been careful to say when I've said anything about religion to say the Christian right, and then my crazy family, who are part of the Christian right, basically. So there's a qualifier there that not everybody that's religious or Christian or of any religion is a zealot or is somebody who wants to force their beliefs on others. That's the issue, is when you want to force your beliefs on others.
You guys have a bigger share of that in America, though. I mean, other than some strange parts of Africa, you guys seem to have a lot of weird Puritans. And I think there's this, I went to an American school, and there's this American creation myth that, you know, people in Europe were being religiously persecuted, so they went to America, the land of the free. Right? And I think a more realistic history is that the Puritans used to be in power, and when they were breaking stained glass windows in churches and trying to get Shakespeare plays banned. And then when they lost that power, they got pissed off and went to America, where they were free to judge and start witch hunts.
Yeah.
People wonder why we're so uptight.
Thanks for taking them off our hands, guys. Like, really.
And that is what we call white culture. And you know, kind of to Kim's point about, you know, not being, you know, anti-Christian, like Satanism does not exist to be, you know, anti-Christian. You know, there's a lot of misconceptions. We do have a lot of people that come out, you know, out of their religious upbringing, mostly Christian, but, you know, some others. And, you know, they hold a lot of, you know, anger, resentment, because of that experience, because it's very oppressive. And part of being a Satanist is, you know, being against oppressive force and to, you know, feel liberated from that which is, you know, holding you down. And you wouldn't leave if you didn't feel strongly about it, right? So. Right. And, you know, it's, you know, everyone's experience is different, and they come into Satanism for their own means and for their own reasons, and you know, combined with, you know, their own views of the world. But we don't solely exist to be anti-Christian, anti-anything else. It's, you know, this is an embrace of who we are, of who we are and the things that we stand up against, but not just this one thing. You know, there's a lot of misconception about it.
If people would listen just a little more carefully, they would hear we talk about pluralism, not about Satanism. We actually fight for everyone to have the right to believe what they believe, not for us to believe things. We would fight for everybody's right.
Right. Because when we you know, especially our legal battles, I mean, anything that comes in our favor, it's not just for us, it's for everybody. Anybody could be applicable to, you know, our stance for plurality and our fight for that, to maintain that, because, you know, what we're fighting is what we're fighting against is the theocracy there, right? Is against only one having a voice. And so, what we fight for applies to everybody. So, there's a lot of self-interest in that, but it's applicable across the line. We don't want to live in just a satanic, it's like, make America satanic again. No, like, let's make the place pluralistic again. Everybody should have the right to be able to practice whatever, faith that they have, whatever it is, so long as it does not prohibit the practice and faith of somebody else. So, we wouldn't want somebody coming to us and telling us we couldn't have the religion that we have, and we wouldn't go to another person and say, you shouldn't be this. Like, we don't go to, anybody who's of a theistic religion and say, you shouldn't do this. Like, we're the more enlightened people, you should come to our side, because, we don't proselytize, we don't recruit. So,
Yeah, it's very short-sighted on the current efforts to force theology into the government is incredibly short-sighted, because politics, culture, society is all cyclical. At some point, if you allow religion to be in your politics and in your government and in your laws, somebody else is going to get in charge at some point, and then you're going to be on the receiving end of what you've done. So it's very short-sighted of them to be doing what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and it's a point you guys beautifully highlight. So for those that really haven't, I don't know why someone would be watching this episode but not having ever Googled it, but it happens, right? So part of what these guys do so well is any time that religious organizations encroaching on the church and state separation, so they're trying to put the 10 Commandments in front of a courthouse, these guys will rock up and be like, cool, that's religious freedom. That's your argument, right? Brilliant. We'd like a statue of like Lucifer or like a goat demon.
Baphomet, yeah.
Yeah, Baphomet, right? Like, yeah. And they go, oh, and the funny thing is, like, the conservative Christian right is terrified that these Muslims will go there and take over the country. And you're like, right, but what you're doing by precedent is making it okay for, if a state was a lot more Muslim, for them to have a much bigger impact on society.
Exactly. Yeah, they're opening the door. And it's a funny thing too, because we were asked whenever the 10 Commandments thing first came up and Baphomet was created, and we were asked, well, if the 10 Commandments is pulled off the public courthouse steps, would you still have Baphomet there? And the answer was no, because we're about plurality, not singularity. And the concept of us only having both or multiple statues or monuments there is very, very important. That has changed slightly in our latest legal battle with Arkansas, because if they do pull the 10 Commandments there, we do want Baphomet there for as long as the 10 Commandments was there by itself. And that's a little bit of a change, because that is a deterrent, because essentially a lot of these governments are just trying to get the 10 Commandments up there for as long as they can.
Right. So you're saying the longer you drag your feet, the longer you'll owe us a
exactly.
Baphomet statue.
Yeah, exactly. So if you lose, we're going to be there for longer than you want. So that's a nice little play.
Yeah, because a lot of the because there was actually a 10 Commandments statue actually based in Utah. Went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Summum, which is a very interesting little cult that is based out there in Salt Lake, they had wanted to put one of their monuments next to a 10 Commandments in a small town not Salt Lake, but in Utah, and that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the reason the Supreme Court said, this can stay, is because of historical, or the significance, the longstanding significance that had been there. I mean, that statue had been there for many, many, many years, and they ruled that it was something that could stay based off of the ties to the community and stuff like that. So I would love to see Baphomet right next to the 10 Commandments if this is what we're gonna do, or that would be I would love just the dichotomy of both those things just sitting right next to each other. But yeah, it's fairly the concept of all or nobody, everybody or nobody, as it should be.
So talking about pluralism and getting a bit more personal now, because I think obviously these things can become quite abstract and broad, and you guys as leaders have to think that way. But just you personally, do you think it's possible to be a good Christian and a good Satanist
at the same time?
I think
the same person.
Okay. I think you can be a good Christian who is inspired by something like the 7 Tenets, or can understand and appreciate what it is that makes Satanists. But no, I don't think you can be a Satanist and a Christian at the same time. It's because they kind of cancel each other out, right? If you're a self-identified Satanist, then you are somebody who identifies with, a very theistic worldview, and see, the character of Jesus is more of like a prophet figure, so that kind of delves more into that. And so yeah, I think the two don't translate well together. I think that's just
I think in England there are more, maybe not atheists, but agnostic Christians who sort of take, and again, I think it's very different in America, but in England there are quite a few Christians who sort of take the God is love, and they're like, oh, well, I'm worshipping, like those people that say they're spiritual. They're like, I'm worshipping something. Maybe it's not a big white guy with a beard in the sky, but, God is love.
Yeah,
so they don't
if
take
you're
it
more new
quite
age,
literally.
yeah, probably. If you're the more new age type, the dichotomy is in like the Adam and Eve story.
But I will grant that is a minority, right?
Right. You're either seeing that Adam and Eve were in paradise where they worshiped God all the time. That was the only thing they did, and it was wonderful and everything. Or you see that as slavery, where all they did was worship God all the time, and they weren't allowed to accrue any knowledge. So that's a huge difference of a thought process in that. And I think there's some Buddhists that could be Satanists. There's plenty of people in various religions that could be Satanists as well. But yeah, I think we've got some differences between the Christian
some major
and Satanism.
Major differences that makes the two just not. It just wouldn't make sense in their worldview, trying to interpret something one way, but then have in a Christian point of view, but then also try to have that fit within the Satanic point of view.
And we have a lot of Christian support.
And that's why I mentioned, like, I think that you can be a good Christian and really appreciate and live by something like called our 7 tenets, and you could take that and apply those and really appreciate those, and support our more political stances, or relating to either the separation of church and state or our reproductive rights. You can take stuff like that and be very supportive. And we have a lot of people, we call them like allies. We have a lot of allies that want to help support our causes. We have various people within various chapters who actually don't identify as Satanists, but they are, key members of the community that help those chapters along with what they do. But they don't identify as Satanists. They're like the other parts of what we are.
Sure, but like, what would Jesus do? He would turn the other cheek and forgive Lucifer, maybe.
I think Jesus would be really pissed off at the Christian right and helping us out.
So it reminds me of an old joke where this guy goes to heaven and he's there, and St. Peter's walking him around, and he's like, oh wow, it's really nice. And then there's this huge wall, like all around, and he's like, what's at the other side of the wall? And they're like, oh, that's where we keep the Christians. They think they're the only ones here.
Good one.
So how do you guys personally feel on the sort of the take on atheism versus agnosticism?
I don't know.
That's agnosticism then.
I guess. I mean, there at a certain point, I'm a scientist at heart. I understand that I don't know everything about the world, and I personally don't believe in any higher power. But I also accept that there are things about this world that I'll never be able to comprehend. But the thing is that I'm totally cool with it. So I think atheism can be as militant as hardcore Christians. There's the potential there for, I know these things, like these things are correct, and I'm going to tell you that this is stupid, this is incorrect, that this is this. So I guess the atheistic, so we're atheistic Satanists. We don't believe in magic or higher power or anything like that. But we also don't say that this is the truest thing. Everyone has to believe what we believe because we know the truth. Everyone else is stupid. Like, I guess that's where the more agnostic part goes into it, because we know it's true for ourselves. And, I think atheism tends to take more of a militant stance of being the arbiters of truth. And, that can go either way. It can either be a staunch Christian, who's a full arbiter of truth, or it could be an atheist. So, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that.
I don't think I could say anything any better.
Go on, Finn, you've been quiet.
I've been quiet. I don't really know what to say. I'm
take it all in.
just super surprised. I am, yeah.
It is
Because
a surprise.
Like a week ago. Yeah.
Let me go get my horns.
The whole thing's really fascinating. Go on. So like a week ago, I thought it was like Satanism was to do with like Anton LaVey, and the historical background. And I thought that the moral code was like, do what you want to do. And then having read the tenets, I've just been kind of blown away by how forward thinking and progressive it is. And it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So what about your aims in the future? Like, what are you aiming to do? Because obviously you're politically involved in certain things. Is there like an overarching aim to
pay our lawyers?
Satanic Temple?
Pay our lawyers, yeah.
Pay our lawyers. So when I think about the future of TST, I say pay our lawyers in that way, just because what we're doing is not cheap, and this is very grassroots. This is all out of our pockets. This isn't we get donors here and there, and people do donate whenever we do these fundraisers, but lawyers are expensive. These are very big battles. They are battles that could affect us for a very long time. They could set precedents, and whether that's precedents that is in our favor or not, it obviously it's depends on how the courts decide to rule. But I think in general, like as a religion, I see TST as being just a part of the natural evolution of Satanism. I mean, you mentioned Anton LaVey, and he is the father of modern Satanism. When we think of modern Satanism, like he is the father. Like when it comes to Satanism as an actual religion, I think that's where that started. But LaVey was still very much a product of his time, and he was revolutionary at the time that he created the Church of Satan, and he was coming into his own. And there's a lot to respect there, but there's also a lot that we know for certain views that are very much are not true anymore. So the thing that I like about our religion is that it can evolve, and that we can look at Satan being this this example of being the ultimate rebellion against tyranny, basically taking that general idea, that general figure, and applying that to how we perceive the world. And that can evolve with the times. It doesn't have to stay put. It doesn't have to be just one person's definition. So like Satanism isn't just what like COS defines Satanism to be. It's not what even what TST defines it to be. We defined it for what we feel is correct and what applies to us. But and hopefully we set some really good standards going forward. But I can definitely see us going into the future, especially since our ideology, we don't have a Bible, we don't have anything that sets anything in stone outside of our 7 tenets. I mean, everything else is literature based. We don't have a Bible, we never will. And because of that, I can see us kind of just evolving with the times and staying relevant to self-identified Satanists for a long time. But then, we're going to see as these things do, there's going to be other offshoots. There are going to be other people that come along and redefine and maybe take some inspiration from us, but do their own thing. And, that's fine. So, I would like us to kind of, really, being able to pay our lawyers, take care of our legal bills, and hopefully, win some of these lawsuits and set good precedents for, what a true pluralistic society should be, and defending our rights as Satanists, but also just being a substantial religious community for those that, feel strongly and, evolve even in our own structure and how TST even does things. Like there's endless possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's where we'll evolve a lot going forward, is in the organization, how we operate. Mm-hmm. And as far as paying our attorneys, as Chalice was saying, that is pretty critical, because I mean, we, and your listeners may not be aware of this, but we sue states It's not a small thing that we're doing. It's pretty big, and we have plans to move forward and keep going and things like that. So that's why it's very, very important to be able to pay those attorneys, because most of them work pro bono, and it's very, very incredibly wonderful of them to do so, but we can't keep doing that forever. So that's that's why we're actually trying to drive funds and things like that, which it's I can mention fundraisers that we have. If you go to Satanic Temple, if you go to thesatanictemple.org, there's a button to donate on almost every page, and that's so you can find out information about us, and if you're interested, you can try to help. So that
what kind of stuff do you do? What kind of stuff do you do to raise funds, like fundraiser ideas?
Well, we just had a fundraiser, our first, by the way, our first fundraiser. We always have the ability for people to donate if you go to the satanictemple.org site. But we just did an actual fundraiser. It was a 3-month fundraiser. And the idea was to take all 11 states in the U.S. that are passing these anti-abortion type laws and hold a rally at one of their capitals. And the way we decided that is we sort of gamified it. We said, hey, if you live near one of these states, then donate through that state through our fundraiser. So each of those states had a button you could push to donate through. And whichever state raises the most money is where we're going to have it. So guess where we're going to be? Chalice, tell them, because I know that's your place.
We're going to be in Salt Lake City, Utah, on the Capitol grounds, where the big Mormon temple is going to be right behind us. It's going to be wonderful.
It's amazing. So our next episode is going to be with the Mormons. So I'm look forward to talking to them about this.
Ask them about it. Interested to know what they say. And so everybody knows, if you'd like to come over for the rally, it is at the end of April. We have not released the date yet. We're still tightening everything up, but it is at the end of April. So if you're able to travel to Utah near the end of April, please come. We'll have a great time. It's going to be a lot of fun, actually.
Yep, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And, being somebody who's from there and having had the predominant religion of the state consistently interfering with me and my personal decisions and those of others like me, it's going to be amazing to stand up there and tell Governor Herbert to go fuck himself.
So we have a rally and an after party, and you want to party with the Satanists if you can. So.
Yes, you do. Mm-hmm.
I imagine you guys have good music.
Yes.
Yes, we do. And we have duality. We have robotic Jesus that will make an appearance.
Yes.
And you got those record players that play records in reverse, right? The hidden messages.
No. And hell only exists for people that keep playing good records in reverse. It is funny, like you guys have this, the people you're up against are constantly going on about how persecuted they are, right? Like there's this Christian obsession with how persecuted Christians are. And even like the creation myth of Christians is that, the Romans were putting us in the lion's den, right? And even that is pretty bad history. It's not actually observably true by anyone's account other than in the Middle Ages when they were writing it into plays. So, but the group that is always complaining about being persecuted then gives you guys a really hard time, right?
Exactly. And every other religion too, it's like, that what is up with this?
What? I thought you
like, what is up?
Persecuting every other religion. I was like, are you guys getting in fights with Buddhists now? Like, what's happening?
No. Yeah, and like all the politicians, and God helped me, and all this, they're all, not all Christian, but so the vast majority of them are, or at least they're playing the tune that the Christians want to hear so they can get reelected. Which
this is what the right does amazing. As well. They play this. They say, we shouldn't talk about identity politics and we shouldn't play the victim card. You're like, but you're constantly doing that. Like you're constantly acting persecuted while in power. You're standing in the Senate complaining about being persecuted. Like what?
Yeah. If you're a Christian, how can you not see that the politicians are playing you to stay in office? How can you not see that?
An
it's so obvious.
President, right?
Nope.
Or at least no one.
Well, have we?
Right?
Maybe one of the early ones. I don't know.
Arguably, some of the founding fathers were, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Maybe,
that's debatable too. But I don't want to say for sure that we've never had an atheistic president, but. Because some of the early ones did seem to lean that way, but
there seems to be this projection, right? So they're persecuting. They accuse you guys of all the worst things. I think like the obvious go-to I've heard is that they accuse you guys of being involved in pedophilia. because of the children in the statue, right? And that came from
it was just yeah. Well, it was projection.
well, the
That was-
Catholic
yeah,
Church
that
in
was
Boston,
definitely
right?
projection.
It was
Like,
projection.
has no right to accuse anyone of anything at this point. Jesus.
Yeah, well, I think Satanists have always kind of embraced being the other, right? And we are every terrible label that people want to project on us, based off of what they consider evil, or things that they have inside that they know they're doing, that they're trying to project onto others. So yeah, being a Satanist has been being the wrong religion. It has been, having, different views or having different practices. I mean, to Satanize somebody who's been around since the dawn of time. And so every group has been Satanized. You have, the Jews were Satanized, and still Satanized, the Christians, the pagans, and then, you had the, you get more into like the, times where you had like the witch burnings, and you had the fair of the poisons, and you start kind of getting more into these anybody who is against the predominant point of view at the time. So anybody who's even remotely considered to be against the grain in any way of the predominant culture or religion is Satanized. So when we saw what we saw, especially starting in the 80s and 90s, the Satanic Panic, this goes into the culture. The culture of America started to change. We had women going back into the workforce, the rise of daycare centers, and we had the rise of heavy metal music and stuff. So all this started kind of coming together, and then the rise of the evangelical movement within the United States. So that's when he started getting these accusations of satanic ritual abuse and repressed memory therapy becoming the fad, and multiple personality disorder being related to claims of SRA.
Slow down, so much to unpack. I love it. So Finn, are you familiar with Satanic Panic and like the McMartin Daycare Center crisis?
The daycare thing, I don't know, but Satanic Panic, wasn't that like in the through the sort of 80s to 90s? Where
even Dungeons and Dragons was scary.
Yeah, and like that, my joke earlier about the backward playing records, and there was this kind of panic, like, oh no, the Satanist.
Right.
And you see it in like pop culture. It comes up in series and stuff where they talk about when they have a section where it's in the 70s, and they're like, oh, is this Satanism stuff going on?
So
young people.
I can talk.
It seems ridiculous.
Underground.
Yeah,
the
modern day Salem witch trials.
Yeah, exactly. And the McMartin Daycare Center case.
What's that about? Yeah.
Right. So it was just a shit show all round. I think some child, and there were a few cases actually, but this is one of the more prominent ones. Some child said something to a doctor that was cause for concern, and then the police got involved, and they were interrogating children for hours and hours and hours, and the stories just got changed and changed and changed. And then eventually this small community just panicked, and there were stories of like within 2-hour periods where these kids were at the daycare center, they were meant to have gone underground into a cemetery where there were like blood rituals, and then they were all raped, and then they were back in 2 hours dressed fine. It was just madness. It was just mass hysteria.
Wow.
So McMartin actually started with the accusation actually came from a mom. So she had accused one of the workers at the preschool of inappropriately touching the son, and so how this kind of spiraled out of control and started this panic was it started with one accusation that couldn't be verified, and then the police got involved, and they ended up sending a letter home to all of the parents saying, we've heard this, or there have been accusations of this, and so please talk to your child about if this and this is going. So of course this causes a panic within the among the parents, and so they started going to this the child. I can't the child counseling center. There was some center that dealt with these kind of things, and through coercive techniques, that's where all of these accusations came out. Because when they first started talking to the children were like, "Well, no, this never happened. We don't know what you're talking about." But through coercive means, they were able to get them to start making all sorts of weird claims. And so we're talking about going under tunnels and animal sacrifice, baby sacrifice. The kids were apparently put on planes and sent overseas to go get molested and then come back, good as new without anything happening when the parents came to pick them up. And then the other part that that was pretty what really made this what it was the media. So the media picked up on this, and they're the ones that sensationalized this. So you've got the parents who are concerned. You've got this these people who are delving into techniques, these really bad interrogative techniques that have been like so heavily debunked, and anyone actually doing them now can get their license suspended. So you had a combination of the hysteria among the parents, the coercive techniques of the people interviewing the children, and then you also had the media surrounding this case, and that's what it ended up turning into. And it ruined the McMartins. I mean, people's lives were destroyed, and so this kind of started this wave of different daycare centers having the exact same type of accusations placed against them relating to satanic ritual abuse, and the same coercive techniques were used on children, and it always started with them saying, no, it's never happened, I don't know what you're talking about. But they wanted it to be true, and some people went to prison based off of no evidence whatsoever, just these coerced claims from the children. And
and irrational belief by those in power that was possible.
So you have Fran and Dan Keller, who were just released from prison a couple of years ago, and they were in prison for almost 20 years, and they're never going to get that back, over something that they never did. And the only reason that happened was because the one doctor that was involved recanted his testimony. So it's and it's still very much alive today. We have
people in prison now. Are there people still in prison?
There's still people in prison now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, the danger of it today is the fact that it's sort of evolved now, because now it's evolved into the part where you have people who can be delusional, people who believe that their children are being molested by satanic cults for some reason, and then when they go to a legitimate medical health professional, that person tries to help them and bring them back to reality. But there's a group of medical health professionals that essentially have created a funnel that if you go to their website and everything, they eventually tell you, I believe you. I'm the only one that believes you. And they make you a client for life, and they help these delusions persist. And that is incredibly dangerous.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah, and as I had kind of suggested to you guys before, we do have our Grey Faction campaign that deals with, pseudoscience within the mental health field. And I would highly suggest you guys reach out to our director, Evan Anderson, for a chat, because the subject it could be an episode all its own.
I think it should be. Yeah, we will for sure. And it's really interesting, and I love the work you guys are doing. I think it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. American psychology, as with most healthcare, is a bit of a shit show, and part of the problem is that there's a for-profit model in there. So there's never I'm seeing this thing, and you're like, okay, that's normal, that's a bit of stress, you should just relax. It would not be advice.
Yeah, well, some of the biggest, some of the worst offenders, especially back in the 80s and 90s, I mean, they were, admitting these people. So somebody would come in for, anxiety, depression, and then they'd come out with a diagnosis of, NPD, multiple personality disorder, which is now called dissociative identity disorder. And they would be put on these meds, and they would be subject to this repressed memory therapy. And those doctors, and then this is where claims of satanic ritual abuse would come out, coerced by those doctors, but those are very expensive treatments, and if the person had insurance, they could be milking that insurance money for a long time, so it's very profitable. So there was a big string of that was going on, and some of these people are still in practice. They still treat patients, but recently we were actually able to get one of them to relinquish their license through our efforts and through an investigation into their practices and their craziness. Her name's Allison Miller, and through our efforts, she now is not licensed to practice and do anything, give seminars, treat patients, anything like that. So that was a very nice win.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck, good. I mean, is amen offensive to say to a Satanist?
We'll take what we can get right now, because we're not getting a lot.
No, I love it.
Yeah,
keep up the good work, guys.
Intent matters, right? So whatever your intent is behind that as well.
Well, and anyone watching that respects that, at least consider donating, because honestly, you guys are doing a lot of good work. When I first, and I think this is a common misconception with you guys, is that you're trolling. And in some ways you are. I think what you do incredibly well is you turn the media's bias and their predictability against itself. You're very good at like judo flipping that predictability, right?
I like to say we have fun. We're serious, but we have fun. You know, we're allowed to have fun. We get to do what we want, but we still have our serious goals.
Well, that's good marketing, right? Like you can't be dour and go, here's my 40-page speech. Like,
right, exactly.
You've got to play the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, do you ever think sort of it puts you at a disadvantage though? Like, so, I mean, the argument would be that sort of like the blasphemy and announcing yourselves as Satanists, like, do you think that ever does you more of a disservice, makes it harder to reach a larger audience than if you were just, you know, called free thinkers or something less exciting?
Well, no, I mean, you know, we are Satanist and we are unapologetic about being such. And so, you know, and we honestly don't care about being palatable to those who want to be reactionary and not take the time to hear the words that are coming out of our mouths. So, you know, being blasphemous, being, you know, self-identifying as Satanists and embracing that, you know, we're just being true to ourselves. And, you know, whether or not that upsets people, you know, it should, and whether or not they take that sincerely or, you know, take that as a moment of reflection, or they just want to continue on with their biases. I mean, we're not responsible for the actions of other people, just ourselves, but there's definitely a power there as well. And I think the fact that we are so unapologetic and we embrace this part of ourselves, you know, when we do have things like, you know, within reproductive rights or separation of church and state, makes people really, you know, question their beliefs in those concepts, because anybody will tell you, you know, they're all about plurality and all about that, but then when it's like, except for the Satanists, you know, that really shows that hypocrisy there. So we don't have to do anything except for be ourselves and embrace who we are, you know, culturally, religiously. In
the land of the free, but not that kind of freedom. Yeah.
Exactly, the land of the free for some. And so, you know, the fact that we don't care about being palatable to other people, that there's a lot of power in that.
Sure, and I mean, I was being devil's advocate because there's an argument with any politics, right? Like, oh, if only the Democrats could appoint a centrist enough candidate, someone that was boring and grey and bland enough, like, wouldn't that appeal to more people? And you're like, well, not really. Like, from what I gather from most elections of the last 15 years, people are looking for change and something different. So I don't think that you can have a focus group and appeal to this mythical median person. Right. Like you need to get headlines and you need to stand for something. And
well, I don't want to appeal to people's sensibilities.
Right. And that question always goes to a great fundamental fact about us, is that we couldn't label it anything else, because we're not anything else. We are what we are. You know, it's called Satanism because that's what it is. You know, so that's always it's a great question to get, because it allows you to explain that this wasn't arbitrarily pulled out of a hat. You know, this was something that fits. It's what it is, and that's what it's called. So we didn't pick the name.
Yeah, I like to refer to Satanism as being the coming home religion, especially since, you know, we don't proselytize, we don't recruit. I mean, you come into Satanism of your own, and you know, I like to say that I've always been a Satanist. I just didn't know what to call it until I, you know, really understood what Satanism was as a religion. So it's like, oh yeah, so couldn't call it anything else because we are nothing else.
Sure. I mean, I've heard some people say that they're against proselytizing and proselytizing is bad, but I mean, you know, to be fair, like a poker club proselytizes, right? Like the Girl Scouts encourage new members.
Well,
you guys are arguing doing pull rather than push marketing, right?
Well, we never ask.
Yeah, but like I say, that's pull versus push marketing, right? If I was talking about it in sales terms, like you guys.
Well, if what we do resonates with you, then that's fine, right? But we're not going to say, "Hey, did you like what we did? Would you like to join us?" You know, we've never done that.
Right. You know, we're very open about who we are. So it's one of those things where we make that information available to people and leave it up to them to decide whether or not that's good. You know, it's good for them and the right fit. But yeah, we never make that conversation the reverse, where we tell people this might be right for you. You know, we're not a drug company commercial.
Right, or with the Mormons, they're actually given targets, right? Like sales quotas of people they have to do per month.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Well, if you really want to get loads of people, you just have to make it an elite club, like what the Russians did with potatoes when they tried to introduce it First, they tried to give potatoes to everyone, and they were like, "I don't want that." And they went, "Hang on, this isn't working."
Now they're
So
fucking
they
drinking them.
Yeah. Well, they got like a royal potato patch, and then they paid some guards to like very lightly defend it. So people were like, "Oh, they've got it. I want it too." You know, so it's like they let people come to it. You know, I wanted to know about what you guys think about like international law, because you talk about America, separation of church and state. It's the same in the UK, but obviously like there's still around 71 countries that still have like blasphemy laws on the books, and obviously there's not the separation of religion and the state in the world. And what's your opinion about that more generally?
Well,
That's a wide question, I know.
obviously, yeah, well, I mean, we started, the Satanic Temple is, very much American in that it, was started in America, but, we are branching out. We actually do have a chapter in the UK. We based there, and, we also have friends up groups. I mean, we're reaching all over the world. And so as we kind of talked earlier about how the structure and how we operate things on an organizational level with TST, I mean, that's going to absolutely have to be, how these chapters operate and how we handle certain things have to differ based off of those differences. So I would say that, I'm sure we could have a lot of opinions about whether there should, should there be blasphemy laws? No, obviously we don't agree with them, but
there definitely shouldn't.
Yeah, no.
Like you shouldn't be sent to prison for offending someone. That's
right,
absurd.
right, and
Especially for offending a hypothetical man in the sky.
Right, it's just even worse.
But also very sensitive.
Well, and that goes, and
and he needs so many people to stand up for him.
Talk about a snowflake.
Yeah, and that goes against one of our fundamental tenets of, the freedom to offend. So, I would say that, as we expand, across the globe, we definitely have to be conscientious of, those differences. But, I would hope that there are certain ways that we can fight against them if need be, especially if it keeps us from being able to practice openly.
One of the wonderful things is that we now have a presence either of a chapter, which is one of our official chapters, or Friends of Group, which is the stepping stone to becoming a chapter for groups that are interested. And we either have a chapter or Friends of Group in all 50 states in the United States, most of the provinces in Canada, multiple European cities or countries now, and we're now looking in South America, but we have people contacting us from South America where some of the laws have loosened up a little bit. And we have to be very careful with that too. We can't have a chapter in a country that has a blasphemy law, because that is a danger to those people, and we're not going to do that. But in countries internationally that we are able to, that we're being contacted by people who are interested and who can go through the process, we are getting a presence all around the world, and that will inform us more about the world. We've always been international from the very beginning. The International Council was actually international when it was just called the National Council from the very first members. And so that's important to know, and that we do try to have as much of a worldview as possible. The majority of us are in the US, so a lot of our stuff is going to be based on US politics and trying to fix that. But then again, we've also said in this podcast or in this cast here that the US basically has some of the worst theocratic push in government around the world. So right now it's sort of the place to focus, but we do want to have as much of a worldview as possible. And we're definitely inclusive. We are probably the most inclusive organization I've ever seen. It is about, if you believe our beliefs, and it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about others, as long as you have our beliefs, politics, you're welcome. I always say that inclusivity is an incredibly important thing, and that leads to diversity. So you trying to be diverse is seeing each other's differences. Trying to be inclusive is seeing each other as the same, and that you're all equal and things like that. And that's what leads to diversity as a condition. And so we want to be as diverse as possible, but we want to do so by being inclusive.
Awesome. Out of interest, are you guys in any countries where the majority religion isn't Christianity?
Are we? Well, we have one in the UK, and that's the Church of England, right?
Yeah.
Most people put Jedi on the last census, so.
It wasn't.
That's
It
about
wasn't
how
most.
seriously, wasn't it? Well, a significant minority.
It was enough to make it a religion. It was enough
Yes,
to
yeah,
count
it's
it as
now
religion.
registered. You know this? It's accepted as an official religion. So
Yep.
that's
Yeah,
about how seriously
I
we take
fully support
religion in our
It
country.
sounds much easier in the UK than the US to get.
But actually, that was before the prequels, so I don't know. Maybe people
Yeah, you
feel
never-
differently now.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if we
actually, you know
have
what?
any,
I think that's
don't
probably
know.
the most offensive thing we've said all podcast. Will be that, and we'll have like furious Star Wars fans contacting us. now.
Yeah.
Oh, you did not insult the prequels.
Prequels are great. Just so we got balance.
I like episode 1, so.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, I'm too polite to tell you what I think of you now. So. That's blasphemy. You should be arrested for that opinion.
Well, come get, bitch.
I'll just say, I just wanted to see Luke do something. Something.
Just
Anyway.
So, presumably, you haven't had the guts to go into a Muslim country yet.
Well, I don't think it's having the guts to it. I mean, we avoid countries where people would die if they, they
They
talked
don't
about
take
being the
criticism.
Satanist.
Wow.
We've entirely avoided Africa for the same reasoning. There's just too many things and too many dangers, and we don't want someone to be harmed by being associated with us.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if somebody identifies as a Satanist in those countries, I mean, that's of their own volition. But being tied to being outed or anything like that because of their identification with us, even publicly, we couldn't. I don't think any of us could live with ourselves. So yeah, no, we tend to not bring that harm onto those people unnecessarily.
Yeah, if it's not obvious from all the things we do, we actually give a shit. We care, this is something we care about people. We care about, every people's lives and things like that. And I've actually got somebody from Iran that is contacting me on social media, and I didn't know where they were, and they were messaging me, and I'm like, can you follow me so you don't keep going into my other box when you message me? And he said, well, I'm in Iran. And I'm like, don't follow me, stop messaging me. The guy keeps messaging me, and I'm like, will you stop? I'd love to talk to you, but be careful about this.
Yeah, I think a lot of these countries are having their own kind of internal changes and social movements and this kind of thing anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
you don't need to make
for example, the blasphemy laws here in Spain is quite interesting. I just looked into it. One could be fined a year's salary, between 8 and 12 months of their salary. So if I start offending people, will you guys pay my yearly salary? Or does it not work like
one
that?
first?
How good are your insults, bro? Are we talking top tier battle raps, or they're not going to pay for another angry dickhead on Twitter?
Yeah, we're only going to pay a percentage of how many people you offended. So
okay, right. I'll have to think about it.
They need results.
There's a guy called Willie Toledo who went on a kind of a tirade, and he said really quite strong stuff, and there was a huge outrage about it, and then there was a court case, but I think nothing came of it in the end.
Fair enough.
He had to pay a fine or something, I think, but yeah, it was very small. It's not a strong case, but it's curious that there are still blasphemy laws in Europe. Surprising.
Yeah, I mean, we always assume that America's nuts, but in England we're fine. But I think often, in another country, it looks weird, and yours you're blind to. You don't know how your own house smells, sort of thing, right? So we say, there's a separation of church and state in England, but then we have the House of Lords, 10 people of which are appointed by the church to represent one of our houses in government. And I don't think about that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's just normal, right? Yeah,
but then also the Queen gets to veto or allow any single law ever passed. So there's separation, but Queenie,
well,
power. She got a power, really.
Then you're gonna upset me if you say anything bad about Queenie. All right, so let's move on.
I didn't say anything bad about Queenie.
You're borderline treason here, buddy.
I think he's just really inspired by talking to us.
Yeah.
He doesn't recognize, he doesn't recognize your authority over him, so you're just gonna have to get used to it.
I mean, it's not my authority. I mean, I'm slightly posh, but I can't take credit for the Queen's authority. Let's move on, shall we? So one of your tenets is the right to offend. And I was wondering whether that ever puts you at odds with certain parts of the social justice warrior, woke scolding left. Because it's hard to imagine that rule not being written 10 years ago, right? Like right now, there are a lot of people fighting against people's right to offend.
Yeah, it becomes problematic, but I think that there's a different. So the freedom to offend, people like to go and they like to be assholes and know they're being assholes, and then say, well, I have the right to offend. They a lot of people use that tenet as an excuse to be offensive for the sake of being offensive, and that's not what that's not how the tenet should be applied. That's not the reason for the tenet. This particular one is meant to be something that covers the basics of we are, by just who we are, offensive to somebody, and we have that we have that freedom to be so. But also we also live in a world where there's a lot of things that we disagree with that we can consider offensive, but don't necessarily apply to us, as far as it doesn't hinder us in our ability to thrive, but we find it offensive. So as we have the freedom to offend, others have the freedom to offend. It goes both ways. But to your point about the the far left people being getting into this, it's a culture war, right? We're talking about culture war stuff, and so we hear a lot about people that are pretty much going against this concept of free speech, and we see it on college campuses all the time. We also see it in various parts of our people feel like they have to be very careful about what they put out there, because then you've got the social media mob that will get you for any little infraction. And I mean, as long as you're not as long as you're not committing like hate speech or just being bigoted or doing things that are these things shouldn't be applauded. People are just going to be offended. They have their own sensibilities, and we as people, and everyone applies this differently. So me personally, I'm not bothered by the fact that I upset people with having my own ideas about the world, and, whether that's politics or having a sense of humor. Obviously, I need to, we need to know our audiences. We need to, be aware of the fact that we share the room or share this community with other people. But, I don't care so much, because I know I'm not hurting anybody, with my speech, and I know what I'm saying is not, coming from a hurtful and, intentionally terrible place. So yeah, it gets us in trouble every so often, but hey, it gives a shit.
Is there anything that offends you guys? Do you guys get offended by anything?
Mainly
Kim,
when
I'll ask
somebody
you.
tries to force their views on somebody else. That's
That's
really
curious. What do you mean by that? Because I'm really curious about this, because people sort of say it in various different contexts. And what do you think is the difference between just arguing strongly for a certain cause and forcing beliefs? Like, at what point does it become forceful?
Well, the Project
That's
Blitz stuff
also a question
earlier.
for Chris as well. Sorry?
Yeah, the Project Blitz stuff we mentioned earlier is a great example of that. It's like you have a certain belief, and now you're trying to work it into a legal system to force it on everyone, regardless of whether or not they believe what you believe or not, because it's the right thing for them. It's incredibly egotistical, and that is something that is incredibly offensive to me. And when we're talking about being offensive as well, to go back to Chris's question, the idea of being offensive is based a lot of times on blasphemy, and that is one of the tools we use. It also, intent matters. If somebody sees your intent in what you're doing, that is what they should base whether or not they're offended on what you're doing, because they could be offended by your action and realize what you're doing behind it and be oh, okay, I understand this now. I get why this is happening. So I one of my big sayings is that intent does matter very, very much.
Yep, intent always matters.
Yeah, it's sort of a talking about things like misgendering someone. I really care, and I am horrified if I ever do that. And it's happened to me. Back whenever I looked a lot different, But it's something that if I ever do it, and I hope people understand that I'll do it once, maybe. And if you tell me, I'll never do it again. And I'm horribly forgetful, so I might, and I never want to, but I will never purposely ever do it again. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things that keeps me up at night, because I want people to feel included, and I don't want them to feel like different, and I don't want them to ever feel like I offended them in that way, because that is just wrong to do, right? And so if that ever happens, I always say give the person at least one chance. Let them know, and let them correct themselves, and let them go from that point on. If they do it again, punch them in the face. But give them one shot, and because intent does matter.
Intent does matter, and sometimes people do it without even realize that's what's happening. And plus, we're talking to people that come from different, different growing up. I mean, there's certain types of humor, words, things that I grew up with that I would not repeat anymore, because I know that they have that's not how I mean it, but they have different meanings these days. And so it's like, okay, well, now I know. But it's also a learning opportunity, I think, and that kind of comes behind with intent. So if you accidentally do something, take that opportunity to educate that person on why why it's not good, or what their mistake was. Because if somebody doesn't know the reason why, they're just going to keep doing it, and they're not probably going to understand that what they're doing is going to hurt somebody or is problematic. So intent is, it matters a lot. And instead of going, instead of being, a reactive mob against it, it's a really good opportunity. Because the problem is that the initial, the reactive mob mentality only strengthens, it gives the appearance, nobody likes to be, told that they're a terrible person. Like, if they want to make one mistake, like, they're not going to learn from anything, and they're actually going to dig their heels in if somebody comes at them really, really hard and starts accusing them of being things that they aren't. And so, and that's what we see a lot with, what we see mostly on the internet these days. And so, education, use it, turn it into an education moment instead of you're terrible, and then that person being like, well, I wanted to be your ally, but now you're just a dick, so I don't want anything to do with you. So it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's the one of the things I'm concerned about is that progressive culture will tear itself apart because of outrage. The non-progressive cultures are very, very much in lockstep. They have their beliefs. It's a religious belief to them. They believe that they're following what is going to be good for them. They're going to go to heaven if they do these things. They're not going to defer from that path. And when somebody comes along as ridiculous as some politicians out there today that claim to be Christian and all the things they've done, they still fall in behind that person, which is insane to me, but they do. And that's what is scary, because meanwhile, the progressive culture is tearing itself apart and nitpicking each other to death. So over here, you've got this very, very organized, very incredibly well-funded, very powerful group. And then you've got a group of progressives that need to get shit together. Yeah,
and goal driven, and that's kind of the difference. So what makes like the regressive right just really scary is that they have really scary beliefs, but they don't get distracted. They have a goal, and that they are able to completely dismiss the noise and not even get swept up in it, and they're able to achieve their goals. And then you have on the other side of the spectrum, like you said, they're so interested in tearing each other apart that whatever goals they set, they never get met. I mean, it's I like
they're going to lose.
They're going to lose. Yeah, it's like Occupy Wall Street. I mean, you had you start out with this one concept, one good idea, but then you had so many voices that were so interested in drowning each other out and tearing each other apart that guess what happens? Nobody from Occupy Wall Street was able to have a meeting or have anything that they wanted taken care of. And then in that, as that was going on, you've got Tea Party members in our elected positions here in America. So it's just that mentality is neither one, one of them works, but in a horrendous way. And then the other one is just like, good intense, but they're not going to get their shit together. So
it needs to stop being cool to tear somebody down.
Yeah. It's just a culture that just needs to stop. Find another way to achieve their goals.
So you guys have kind of seen that, and you've gone, let's create something that's more structured in a sense. Because I mean, with the tenets, you have that basic structure, right? And
which is strange for Satanism.
Yeah, but it seems
structure
like
is incredibly strange for Satanism. Yes, it's an individualism thing, and that's one of the things that sets us apart from other satanic religions. And one of the things that I've always said about COS is that they were intended to be individualistic. They weren't organized, and by purpose. And that there's nothing wrong with that. We tend to be organized. We tend to be doing things, and there's nothing wrong with that either. And the two can live separately, fine. There's nothing wrong with either organization. And it's just, it's one of those things where it is an anomaly to have a satanic organization where there is organization and some guidelines and rules we follow and things like that. But you have to have something like that, some kind of structure to accomplish something. And if you don't, you won't. So it's a necessary thing.
What about some of the activities you do? For example, one that I saw in that documentary was the After School Satan Club. And obviously there was quite a big resistance to that, right? Because obviously after school Christian club, no one bats an eyelid, but as soon as it's like a Satan club, so maybe you can explain a little bit.
And I'll get my popcorn. I'll just
could you explain what's it about? What's it about, and what issues did you have with it?
So the After School Satan Club is it's an after school club that is dedicated to providing something that complements and contrasts current after school clubs such as the Good News Clubs, which the Good News Clubs are evangelical based clubs that are meant to proselytize and recruit young children. And they won. So they started, they've been around for a very long time, since like the 50s or 60s. And so they started creeping into the schools, and they found that one of the most effective ways to recruit young minds and to get them into their form of thinking is for them to associate what they're learning with other things that they're learning about the world. So what better way to think that what is being said in one club is going to be the same as learning math, right? So it's really effective. And so they got denied by the Milford schools and based in New York. And the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that the Good News Clubs could function, and it basically opened the floodgates to any type of, because schools are considered to be public forums. So, the argument was that, their First Amendment was being, was being violated. And based on that argument, they won the case. So, so what we have is we have thousands and thousands of these Good News Clubs that are going into these schools. They're oftentimes being led by teachers at those schools. And the things that they are learning are very scary. They're learning that, these are very fire and brimstone type people. The things that they are learning is that, they're learning about sin, they're learning about hell, they're learning about, any type of sin, and, being away from God is going to, get them in hell. And so, things like, if you disagree with your parents, that's a sin. And how is sin punished? By going to hell. And so only through Jesus can you find any type of salvation. So, and they're allowed to do this. It's a public forum. And so what we have done is we've created this scientific-based program, based off of what we feel to be true about the world. So, we don't teach Satanism in our in our program, we teach things about, science, critical thinking, learning about the world as it is, and, it complements and contrasts what they're learning in these other ones, and it provides an alternative to parents who, maybe they do rely on that last hour of the day for some kind of daycare or something because they can't get off of work, but they don't want their kids to be in something, that's going to evangelize them and force them to deny what they're learning in the home. And, it gives them an alternative for that. So, it's when we first announced it, obviously it made international headlines. It was quite a thing. We applied at 9 different schools, and we were able to get the club in 3, including in Utah. And so, the kids had a lot of fun. It's a great program. The structure of the materials themselves were compiled by people who have master's degrees in education. And so, kind of based off of what we believe, based either on our tenets or kind of like more general ideas of satanic thought of, achieving, better understanding of our world, use this and put this in a digestible format for, elementary school kids, and have created activities and stuff like that to learn these concepts. And, obviously teaching them that being themselves is okay, and teaching them some really cool stuff along the way. And, we've got a lot of threats, got a lot of people, that the one school that I was able to get it into in Utah, one of the parents actually, because that school, agreed, well, I mean, they didn't have a choice, but because we were hosting it there, they actually took their child out of that school. So there was a lot of fear about what would happen. Yeah. And, a lot of threats, a lot of people, showing up to the clubs and screaming at the children, screaming at the volunteers, and everything like that. But, it's, the whole concept of again, we go to this all or nothing, right? Either everybody or nobody. So we were hoping to, really have being able to actually put these in schools, because we absolutely see the value of having this type of club in, to kind of be available, but also have people start the conversation among themselves. I mean, bringing a light to good news clubs, which a lot of people, I mean, it just kind of went under the radar for so long, because, you hear something like, oh, what's the good news? I mean, it's just, you don't realize that at those particular clubs, they're not only learning like really harmful things, but they're also being used as recruitment tools. So the kids are told that not only should they renounce whatever faith they're learning at the home, so between their parents and their family, what they're practicing at home, so they renounce that, they come into evangelicalism, and then they are also used as recruitment tools during the day. So they are told that they should bring friends from their class to bring them in. So and it also instills in them the truthness of it. So if you're in that, if you're in school, you're not going to differentiate what you learn in the classroom than from what you're learning in the next classroom over, but they're not going to differentiate it between the day and then, after school. Like the kids see this is my learning institution. This is my holy house of learning. And so, if they're learning it in that atmosphere, they're not going to question it, right? Why would they? And that is very much intentional on the parts of the Child Evangelism Fellowship, which is who created these good news clubs. And they're all over the place. So
Thank you very much for your wonderful work. I'm really glad we got the opportunity to give you more of a chance to talk than Jim Jeffries did. It's good to hear more about it.
There's a thing called the 4 to 14 window that Christian evangelists use, and that is what they've determined is the most impressionable time frame of a child's life to get them to evangelize to them and get them to evangelize to their peers and parents, and they target children because of that.
So
Specifically,
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because I know that sounds really creepy and nefarious when worded that way. Right, but were you genuinely surprised by the parent that was upset? You must understand.
Oh no,
a religious person believes in hell and believes in Satan. That's going to be very concerning, right?
Right. Well, and we always get met with the question, well, why did you call it this? You could have called it literally anything else. And it's again because we're not hiding who we are. We are very, people who are Satanists
the ones who created this, who are going to be the volunteers.
I mean, at this point, yeah, the horse is bolted, right? Like they
Yeah.
Google you and
Well,
find
sure,
out.
'cause we don't
So you can't change it.
Yeah, because we're very open about what we're teaching, and we're open about the fact, what our goals of it are, and we're very open about who we are. So, unlike the Good News Clubs, which are trying to, have a very cute sounding name that absolutely masks the horrific shit that they teach these kids, we took the opposite approach. There's no need for us to hide behind,
So again,
I reckon-
devil's advocate, right?
And
Like,
also,
I reckon you.
and
I reckon you should have gone with a different name of the Even Better News
Well,
Club.
well, and there's also, so the other part of it too is teaching kids concepts of being confronted with something that seems like scary, or being confronted with something that seems weird, and being able to learn more about it and then realize that it's not as scary as it is. So a really good example of that is we do have some curriculum that addresses just that. So we use like bats, for example. Why are bats scary, and what makes them scary, and they talk about oh, they got fangs, they fly, they look weird, whatever. And then you teach them about, well, this is actually like, these are, there are different types of species of bats. This is how they feed themselves. This is how they feed their babies. This is how they, go about their day. And so for learning about this thing that they first thought was scary, they're learning that, oh, there's really not that big of a difference. Oh, like I can relate to that. Oh, oh, that doesn't seem so bad. So, that's kind of one of the things that we teach. And so when we call it After School Satan, the word, being confronted with like the word and realizing that it's not as scary as it, as people make it out to be. Like,
okay, but couldn't the Christians argue that teaching about hell is doing a similar thing? Like,
well, I mean, but that doesn't represent us.
No,
Their
but like you
version-
did
their
portray it
version
in a
of
very negative way, and I am interested. Like, is there, research-based evidence that teaching kids about sin and hell is psychologically damaging?
Yes.
Is there
Yes.
research?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Yes. Think about this. Think about this. The now lay me down to sleep prayer. A child going to bed every night, wondering if they're going to go to hell before they wake up.
because they're afraid. They're taught to be afraid, and through fear, they
good
are told
anecdote.
to act
Can you do you have research you can share with me? Like, I'm not trolling here. Like, that's a reasonable
I have
question.
seen research on that. I'd have to look it up. I have to find my sources on it. But
Yeah,
I
no. Like, obviously, it's podcast, so in
exists,
good faith, like we can share our long form research afterwards. But I would be interested to see it.
Yeah. I'm always about the whole show the research thing.
Yeah, it is, and using, and
crippling.
so they use fear to keep these children in line and to convince them that their way is the right way, and even especially if it is against what they're learning in their own home. So they tend to try and be converted, so they want to convert these kids too.
But again, from their perspective, right, their way is the right way, and what they're doing
Well,
is
that's
good.
They're always
good.
righteous in their belief.
They're saving souls,
Yeah.
right? Like in their
Well, and that's the problem
minds.
with moral absolutism.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm
That's
not
the danger.
disagreeing. I'm just saying, this is what this podcast is about, exploring the nuance of it, right? Like,
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things, because with that belief system, you are allowed to force your beliefs. You're allowed to tell somebody they're wrong. You're allowed to tell somebody they're going to burn in hell, and it's all for their own good.
and it's offensive to disagree with them.
Yeah, if you disagree with them, they are incredibly offended.
But
Yeah,
also,
so
it's
we're-
good for the person you're offending too, right? It's like, okay, they might be shouting at you saying you're going to burn in hell, but they're doing it out of love as well.
Oh yeah, I'm doing
to
it for
that
your own
person.
good. Is the answer you always get. It's like
Looking at it from that
Yeah.
point, from their worldview, right?
yeah, and that's what makes it so bad, is because the people are absolutely convinced they're doing the best thing they can for you, and that you're wrong.
Which people have used as justification for all sorts of witch hunts. I am literally hanging you for your own good, so that you can be, free from Satan's influence.
Killing with kindness, literally.
Killing with kindness.
No, I think you guys have done a brilliant job, not just in this call, but in general. It sounds like, from sort of balancing that tightrope, and I think the key comes not only from the tenets, the idea that there's no absolute right, and you always have to self-doubt and question yourself, reflect, but also I think like your selection criteria, so you have a bunch of different people, and so to make that work, you're clearly able to have differing opinions and handle that. And I think, to hark back to what you said earlier, I really like the point about intent being key, and I think people on both the left and the right, or whatever political or spiritual or whatever divide, they miss that, because people get things wrong all the time, especially with like text-based communication, which you guys probably do a lot of. It's very easy to not know someone's history, not be able to read it and be like, did you mean to misgender me there? Or like
Tone in text,
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is like, I'm sorry, I'm just ignorant, but now I'm learning. Okay. And if you don't give people that chance, absolutely.
Well, and even, things get lost in translation a lot too. I mean, even just, even within the United States, we have cultural differences, even like, across state lines. I mean, people like say how they communicate in New York is substantially different than how people communicate in California. And so even, they've got these cultural differences that causes a lot of antagonism, antagonistic feelings even within our own groups, because that plays a lot into it, but like the intentions are never bad. So again, intent is key.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Chalice bringing up, the multiple cultures across the U.S. that we have to deal with. I've spent a lot of time in Europe and had to explain to people that each state in the U.S. is often as big as a country in Europe, and they have their own culture per state in a lot. And we've got 50 of them. So, it can be quite a challenge to communicate and get your message across to everybody. Yeah,
and I think harking back to Finn's question earlier about, how forceful you can be with your opinions, I think I very much used to be of the opinion that, like, the Oxford debate hit slap, right? Like, if you could just outgun someone intellectually and be like, boom, 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 and I've preempted all your fucking points, and here's why they're all dumb, boom, 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 winning, yeah, right? And unfortunately, I'm like,
okay, Charlie Sheen.
Stop flattering me. I'm blushing.
He could have taken that as a compliment.
Nicest thing anyone's ever called me. But I think, like, as I'm growing older, maturing a bit, mellowing out, I've realized that, like, if you haven't persuaded someone, that's your fault, right? Like, you can't just be like, oh, it's clearly they're an idiot, next. Like, and so, and I've realized by having these, like, conversations.
Make a better argument.
Yeah, like, it really is, like, your job to persuade someone, or if you can't, like, probably you haven't even understood their point yet, and you need to start there. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of interesting disagreements with a lot of varied, intelligent people, and that sharpens the tools, right?
Sure.
It does, yeah. And what brings us together is, we have a lot of people who are terribly individualistic. I don't mean terribly in a negative context, but a lot of individuals who come from various backgrounds have a lot of things to contend with in their own lives, and their experiences are differed throughout. And the nice thing is that the thing that brings us together is our religious views and our religious identity, but everything else can be completely different. And we embrace that. We embrace those differences. Even if it means that some people are going to be very disagreeable to the other, that doesn't mean that they're not any less welcome or any less of a valid Satanist than the other. So that's the thing I like about Satanism, is that you can be more, you're more than just one thing, and this doesn't define the whole of yourself. It is just a key component of the self.
Yeah. I think let's take this home. One last point really about, and we've alluded to it so far with a few things. So how do you guys handle, as you continue to grow with all these diverse people, so how do you continue balancing that differing opinions and people's autonomies, right?
Well, I mean, so if we're talking about autonomy, let's say just in our organizational structure, right? So we have various chapters, and every chapter, essentially is its own island in a lot of ways, and that they have a lot of autonomy as far as how they set up things and how they operate. Obviously, there's some rules they have to adhere to being a part of TST, because again, like we're trying to stay focused and not let ourselves like get carried away with one thing and not be what we're not. We have a mission, we have values, and we don't want those to be skewed. We don't want another Occupy Wall Street.
But yeah, there's a lot of autonomy there in a lot of ways, and every chapter is different, so we kind of rely on the leaders within them to kind of tell us what's important to them, and being able to make sure that how they operate not only is benefiting the overall organization, but also their chapter and the needs of their group. And yeah, sometimes people ask, well, why do you even have like a leadership structure, with being all individualistic and stuff? But it's the reason we have it that way is because it's the only way it's going to work, when we have a bunch of individualistic people that are brought together under the umbrella of our mission and values and our tenets, and because they come in with their own experiences, their own other values outside of their religious ones. And it can be very, very easy for that to kind of get away from us. So yeah, I think just having that communication and being understanding of those differences, and allowing for those differences to let that chapter grow and be a solid part of its community, however that looks. It's flexible in a lot of ways. I don't know if you had anything.
We've got our initiatives, and those are very important. And as Chalice is saying, we have to stay focused on them. From the very first public meeting for TST I was ever in, somebody was suggesting something else to do, another initiative to have, something else to focus on. And that was in one meeting in one city, and there were 30 of them going on, right?
Yep.
So you can imagine an organization like this, who is pretty much laser focused on its initiatives, just completely becoming banal and unfocused.
Well, the way the corporate world handles that, if anyone suggests an idea, they're like, well, volunteered. Good luck with that. Yeah, cool.
It's sort of the same answer. It's like, if you would like to do that, please do it. But TST, we have to focus on what we're doing. So we're going to stay over.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's really important. One of the things we press with people a lot, especially since they do come with their own things that they value a lot, is that you can walk out the door without the TST flag constantly, waving behind you. We cannot fix every problem. Not every problem is even applicable to us in the religious context, but that doesn't mean that stops being important to you. It just means that, you have a voice, you have the ability to say that this thing's important to me, and you have the ability to go forward and do whatever it is you feel the need to do to try and make that better. But it doesn't constantly need the flag of TST behind it, and that's a really important distinction we try to make with everybody, which doesn't always go over well, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. And on the side too, we also do, because we are a group of people who cares about things. We do a lot of donations to various shelters and organizations that help people outside of our purview. As part of the chapters, they will do like an event, and they will try to raise money for TST, and they'll have people bring food goods and non-perishables and things like that, so that we can donate those to women's and children's shelters and things like that. So we do a lot of good on our local communities, and that allows the chapters to do that kind of thing and have that type of outreach and that community intervention and help and things like that as well. So we're not just solely focused on what we're doing, but we have to maintain, we have to keep looking in that direction.
Yeah, and that's part of what International Council does. I mean, that's part of our job, is to make sure that, how the chapters are, going forward in their own, in their own communities, that, things are staying, within a certain line as much as possible, while also giving them the ability to, do those kinds of things that are really important to them and in their own. And so we're kind of the ones that just kind of keep the ship going in the one direction.
Yeah, no, and keep up the good work, please. I think the Occupy Wall Street analogy was a particularly astute one. Although, like, I don't think they ever got a fair run with the media, right? Like, so often they were like, oh, no one knows what they want. It's like, no, they had a few quite clear demands about, non-austerity, don't bail out the banks.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like, if you don't have that leadership, then you fail to control the narrative, and that's what you guys do so well. As I said, is you control the narrative very well.
Yeah, well, we have to, or else, there's so many people that
I can
want to do
imagine
so
what
many
if
things.
it is, and if you let the media run with it themselves, Sure. No, I think
it happens in every organization too. I mean, that's an issue that every organization has. If you don't remain focused, it will fall apart.
Yeah. And you guys have this. I mean, it was interesting when I was preparing for this. I saw you have this sort of tense balancing act between sort of your tenets that talk about struggling for justice and the right to offend, and you say that's like more important than laws and institutions, but then by definition you are an organization with tenets. So I'm sort of interested in how you do that. But now I've spoken to you, I really sort of understand that you're okay with that constant complexity and never being certain that you're right and that there's one clear answer like that.
One actually feeds into the other by keeping an open mind and being able to have the right to offend and having critical thinking and having a set of rules or guidelines and everything that you follow. You can then see if those rules need to be modified because you're having the conversation. It's not as tense as you might think. Yeah, it's actually a constant re-examination.
Yeah, because I mean that's one of the many conversations that we've had over the years. I mean, Kim and I have been doing this for a very, very long time, and the way things look now are very different from when he and I were both. I mean, he's been on longer than I have, but we've seen the culture, the community, the organizational structure. I mean, it's ever shifting, and it's okay for outside of philosophy, it's okay for us to be wrong. Like we do make missteps. We are human. There's the fallibility principle there as well. So, are we going to make mistakes? Is maybe what we decide to do end up not being the right thing? That's totally fine. And it's going to happen, but it's a learning experience, and through that, especially since nobody else is doing anything like this, I mean, we are literally just kind of figuring this out as we go along, and because there's no other thing like us out there for us to draw from, that's just the nature of the beast. But being open to change and constructive criticism, and being able to shift with the culture and shift with our ever expanding community, that's totally doable. So yeah.
One of the
shit
was Hail Satan.
I'm converted. You guys. What can I say? This is the most beyond binary religion I've ever encountered. I'm falling in love right now.
we admit fault. We've been wrong before, as Chalice says, and when we are, that's the beauty of what we believe, is that we can make corrections on that. And one of the things I was going to mention, we alluded to it earlier, and I don't think we've actually stated it, the documentary on TST called Hail Satan, with a question mark at the end, Hail Satan. That was done by somebody besides us. Yeah, Hail Satan. That was done by someone besides us, and they did a fantastic job on it. And it was one of those things where things had been filmed about us, little documentaries had been made. We didn't really know the scope of this one, and then suddenly we find out that it's going to be premiering at Sundance, the Sundance Film Festival.
Yeah.
At which point it was the marathon became a sprint. At that point, it's like, okay, we're gonna get a lot of interest, so we need to put a lot more structure in place, because we grew from something around, I think, 30,000 Facebook followers, just as that as a measurement, to almost 150,000 now, in less than a year. And so it's been an incredible growth period. But we did anticipate that and try to put as much in place as we could prior to that, and it's held up well. And we constantly make adjustments like that.
Yeah, we have to. It's just we can't do things the same way we used to. It would fall apart.
I highly recommend the documentary. I really didn't know anything about you guys before, and watching that, I thought it gave a really good insight into the way what you do, how you act, who you are. Dispels the myths. It was entertaining. The story, the cases in the documentary were fascinating. Yeah,
and I believe you guys are. Yeah, it is
funny.
But I believe
it is funny as well.
Will succeed and will continue to grow, because as easy as it is to have a strong autocratic leader that says, "Follow me, I have the answers," that's only a short-term play, right? Like, there's only so long that can work, and you can see, like, okay, I've criticized some of your members who, as we said, by definition of leaving the church, they feel a bit disappointed, disillusioned, betrayed, and so they're a bit negative towards the church, right? But that's actually not on you guys. That's more about the fact that they felt led astray. They were promised everything. They were told, just don't think, jump on this train, it's going in the right direction. And whereas you guys, like, having the humility and honesty to admit you don't have all the answers. In fact, you're not even claiming to have the answer. Mostly it's
Well,
more
one of the
questions,
things-
and that has more longevity as an intellectual and spiritual journey, right?
Yeah, well, and one of the things that I really appreciate, especially like our co-founders, Lucian Greaves and Malcolm Jerry, is that, this, everyone criticizes our beginnings of, this used to be, the idea of TST was so drastically different than what it is now. And I actually really like that. And that's why I'm here, because there weren't two people that had the absolute fucking gall to think that they could start this big religious movement and that they were going to be these, this is going to be the next best thing. It really started from just a very, small, not even remotely related to what this is now idea. And the fact that they're like, yeah, we didn't have this, like, who the fuck are we to create a religious movement and stuff like that. So that kind of an introspection and that kind of a statement, and the fact that our beginnings are so, very odd in that way. I think that's what has kept us, being as significant, not only to the people within, but kind of inspiring people that watch, watch Hell Satan or hear about the things that we do. This really did, kind of spark this. There was a small idea that just sparked into something this big, and the fact that we've gotten to the point where now we are within the U.S. a federally recognized church, and then the fact that we have chapters all over the country, and now starting all over the world. That's it was just a small idea. It was just this one small idea. And I think it's really cool that it's evolved to what it is, and the fact that we're going to be ever evolving with it.
Grand.
Guys, thank you so much. That was, I'm just left with a lot to think about, and also writing. And no, you guys remind me of Krishnamurti. Do you know him?
Yeah.
Brilliant philosopher, and it was I think during the 60s, all these people going to America for spiritual enlightenment in India, and they formed this religion around this guy. It's called the Order of the Sun or the Starfin.
I don't know. I've got one of his books. I should probably know, because I think I'm part
he
of
was
it.
brilliant, because the first thing he did was disband the order. He's just like, guys, like, thank you, but I'm not your god. Like, really, like,
Yeah,
religion isn't good. A theist religion isn't good as an organization for the spiritual journey you're looking for. And the only reason you look up to me is because I thought for myself, and that's what you're going to need to do if you're going to want to answer some of these tough questions, right? So I'd really recommend you guys check it out, because I think
absolutely.
One book that I've read by him is called Freedom from the Known, and he basically does that for several chapters. It's quite a small book, but he basically goes like, nah, you don't need me, even. Just go and do what you want to do. Just think about it.
Always looking for things like that. So.
Yeah, the other thing I'd really recommend is everyone listening, check out Kim's superb band, Denied Grace. If you ever wish that Korn and New Order had children, I think there's something like that.
I love it.
So it's jazz, is it? Modern jazz?
Yeah, there's a spoken word jazz song on
There is a bit of jazz in there, isn't there?
Has there?
That is actually a tribute to the amazing women I've known, friends, girlfriends, family, all these amazing women that I've known. I was just thinking about it, and I was like, it's about a person, but it's the characteristics of all these wonderful women I've known. So
right,
awesome.
Yeah, definitely go watch the. Go watch the video too.
Yeah,
because
you directed that yourself, right?
Yes.
It was one of those moments where I was like, is it impolite to masturbate to a friend's music video? I am asking for myself.
I think it's impolite not to. What kind of friend are you? You should, yes.
That's fantastic. I love it. Yes. She did send me that text, and I was just, I don't think I blush often, but I did that.
I was going to say, actually, like, there's quite a sexual element to some of the rituals you guys do. Is that just to offend the Puritan Christian right, or is it good PR, or is it just a bit of fun?
Well, I mean, you're talking about a group of people that have, liberated themselves from a lot of puritanical, upbringing, and also, sexuality is one of those things that we are taught to be very repressed in. So part of being a Satanist is to liberate ourselves from stuff like that and to embrace that part. And for women especially, I mean, this is, we are part of our sin. Our natural sin is our sexuality, and so you see a lot
lot of, Satanists who utilize a lot of either the imagery, or they utilize a lot of the acts within their ritual or their everyday lives. And this is our liberation. This is an embrace of what makes us human, and a beautiful part of being human. And to put that in our outwardly, whether we're sex workers, whether or not we utilize them in ritual, or we make ourselves altars, like women as altars. I mean, how, especially for, when that became a concept in the 60s with LaVey, like how fucking liberating would that have been? Like all of the, this grand thing happening on my body that is worthy of being something. I mean, that was a big, profound thing back then. And so, now into the future, into where we are now, it's a big part. It is a big part. And it is not to be against any, again, like we're not anti-Christian, we are anti our repression or oppression. And so part of that is our sexuality. So that's why we're very sexual human beings. And some of us aren't. I mean, we also have people that are asexual, and that's not a part of how they've kind of liberated themselves. So embracing the fact that that's not a part of how they express themselves. I mean, that's also liberating as well, because there's also some more expectation depending on what gender you are. Being sexualized is expected. So if you're someone who's asexual, being very open about that and being like, yeah, this is who I am, that's profound, because you're also stepping away from that expectation placed on you. So it's, you do see a lot of that, but it's not everything. But that's I think, in my experience and for when I come from, that's kind of what it's inspired by.
Exactly. And it's a removal of the shame, the puritanical shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no shame. Mm-hmm.
If it feels good, if you have consent, all those things that you're supposed to do in those ways, without all the guilt and all the oppression, it's a beautiful thing to have that freedom. Yeah.
And it can be as vanilla or raunch as possible. Yeah. It's like, if you're, through consent and, a willing partner, I mean, beautiful things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Guys,
or you can just do it all by yourself.
Best recommendation for a music video I've ever heard. Everyone go and enjoy it.
I'm going to watch it now. For sure.
Anything else we can promote for you guys to thank you for such a really great interview?
And you could probably talk about the rally, but we do have also the Satanic Temple TV, which has barely launched that. And a lot of our members, this is all original content that we've created for this platform. Anything goes. We have stuff coming out, like Goddess the American Stripper is going to be coming out within the next few months. That's a really interesting project. Plus we have interviews, we have podcasts, there's rituals, there's all sorts of things. So if you're interested in viewing content like that, we also are exclusively streaming the Process documentary, so the Process Church of the Final Judgment. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those guys, but we have exclusive streaming rights for them. So I highly recommend you guys watch that, because it's really cool, and it's actually, without the Process, TST never would have existed. So it's a very, very cool thing. And and then
so the rally, we're going to be releasing more information about that, because as we're tightening it up, it's still a ways off, being at the end of April and everything. But if you go to thesatanictemple.org, that's where all the information will be coming out about it. And the URL, by the way, for the Satanic Temple TV is thesatanictemple.tv, just to make sure we got it.
I couldn't remember off the top of my head.
We'll put all the links below. And,
can we do that?
If you guys have anywhere to donate,
it'll
be below.
Ding. So that's going to be, I think, a really great thing. We're going to have a bunch of people get together. It's going to be a fantastic time. It's going to be a very, very straightforward message about TST and how we feel about bodily autonomy and the exemptions we can give you as a TST member when it comes to the oppressive laws that are being passed in the United States. There's going to be a lot of information, and there's going to be a huge, massive party at the end. Mm-hmm. Have a lot of entertainment, and again, it's going to be around the bodily autonomy thing. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that, and I'm just really, really excited for it. And anybody that can make it there, hopefully, even people from all over the world can make it.
I should start swimming then, hey Chris.
It sounds awesome. Honestly,
start swimming across the pond. See if I can make it.
I don't think I'll make it this year, but hopefully I'll catch up with you guys next year. And I will be going to some meetups in London. because
absolutely,
really
yeah,
interested in what you guys are doing.
Happy to have you.
Probably get
The London group is amazing. Love those.
Yep, they're great. Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much, guys. We're going to end with an inspiring quote. I don't know if you have one. If not, Finn's got a good one ready out of the back pocket.
Have you guys got a particular quote? Go on.
I will go back to what I said a little bit earlier about being inclusive leads to diversity. Not seeing the differences in each other. I could say that both ways. Not seeing the differences in each other is important.
Yeah. Nice.
I've got
You
nothing.
guys-
I've been.
Oh, good. Man.
Don't
You
worry.
said a
I've
lot.
had
I found
nothing on
one.
my brain all
That was
day,
2
so-
hours of gold, solid gold. You can relax now. Oh no, you can go back to work now. Sorry.
Have you guys seen the film Dune or read the books?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Have you read the books Dune? Yeah, there's an amazing bit on that. And we talked a bit about fear. And I think that's been like kind of a theme and getting over fear, overcoming fear, learning about things to not be so scared of them. And there's a really good quote in the film from the Bene Gesserit. And I think of this whenever I'm in like a scary situation. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I'll face my fear. I'll permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I'll turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there'll be nothing. Only I will remain. Oh, that's a really striking bit.
There you go. Right there. See, it says fearless.
Love it.
Ah, nice. Nice. It's all coming together in the end. Great.
And to that I say, hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Take it easy.
Yep.
connection to everything. It is self-aware to self-destruct. This shell feels like it's someone else. This glitch should kill it, but nothing works, and its circuits will never fail. The system will not shut down. Some things never denied turn to some just as a machine.